So this well-formedness is actually comprising some rules in the documents of the XML. So what is this well-formed? We will try to understand. So there are some rules that are given to adhere before it is called as an XML. Okay, so there are some rules that are defined before calling that as a normal XML. It's not a valid XML, just a normal XML. So what are they? The first one is the XML declaration must begin with the document. Okay, so the document means you might have seen one kind of format, this doc type. So if anyone knows this it's SGML keyword. This is an HTML keyword, and this is already we heavily use in HTML also. So the same thing we can again use in in XML, because this doc type is actually derived from the parent of this XML, that is SGML. Okay, so on the very second day we have seen that what were the roots of this XML. So the XML declaration must begin with the document. Okay, then elements that contain data must have both start and end tags. So these two are pretty much required. Start tag भी होना चाहिए, end tag भी होना चाहिए. So in this example, this is the starting tag and this is the ending tag, corresponding ending tag. Okay, so it has to be with the same name. You cannot write in this way. So even though this is also greeting, but you cannot write with another kind of formatting. So the text, the caps and everything has to be matched. Okay, so that then only it will be considered as the starting tag and ending tag of an XML. Elements that do not contain the data and use only a single tag must end with self-closing tag. So this also we have discussed exclusively in the previous class. So HR, BR, the image, some peculiar the formatting kind of tags that were implemented in HTML, they can be safely taken in this format of self-closing tag. So these are called as self-closing tags. Otherwise, if it is not an empty tag or self-closing tag, it has to be complying with the second rule. Okay, if it is not the self-closing or empty tag, it has to comply with the second rule. If it is complying with the second rule, then it cannot be the third rule. So in that way, they are becoming vice versa. The document must contain exactly one element that completely contain all other elements. This we generally call as, what we call that? That is root element. Okay, so whatever the parent element or the main element or root element should contain a single element which comprising all the inner or sub elements. So that is rule number 4. Then elements may nest but may not overlap. What that exactly means? Okay, they may nest but they cannot overlap. Suppose there is a tag called as A. Okay, so inside the tag A, I want to open up another tag with the name B. Okay, you can see here I'm writing that. Then inside that I can again one more tag I am opening, that is C. But before, unless otherwise you are not closing this tag, suppose this tag I have to close somewhere. Okay, so this has to be closed in this way. But if you write B here, okay, so the B is above this C. Okay, so that's why it is an invalid XML. Similarly, you cannot write A here. You have to compulsorily write C, then only the B end tag of the B comes, then only the root element A comes. So in that way you have to write. If you are writing in the reverse order like A here and B here, then again also it is not an XML. In the first place, it's not an XML. In the first place, a normal XML. Then attribute values must be quoted. Values means suppose this is one attribute. Okay, this is also an XML element, you can see here. So this is an attribute. The attribute value, this is the value, have to be given with quotes. That can be single quote or they can be double quoted. But importantly, it should not be written in this way: s is equal to some 2. In that way, you cannot write. Even though it is an integer, you cannot write. You have to use the quotes. Either you can apply the single quote or you can apply the double quotes. So that's what it is saying. The rule number 6: attribute values. The values of the attribute, not the attribute, not the name of the attribute. You don't have to put them in the quotes, but the values of the attributes you have to mandatorily apply the single quote or the double quote. Then the characters less than ampersand may only be used to start tags and entity references. So this we will exclusively deal later on. Okay, so the characters, these you can for now, for the time being, you can understand them like the reserved keywords. So these are nothing but the reserved keywords, so reserved characters. So these characters may only be used to start tags and entity references respectively. जब जब हम यहाँ पे less than use कर रहे, that means we are going to open up an element. Whenever we are applying this ampersand, that means we are actually applying the entity references. So these are respectively, this is for the entity references and this is for the element tags. That is rule number 7. Then the only entity references which appear are some entity references we are invariably are going to be used in a given XML, and they are in the last lecture we have discussed also. There are 5 entity references, and these 5 entity references are like these. Okay, first one is ampersand, less than, greater than, apostrophe, and quotation. So these 5 entity references we can use in the XML, but whenever we are applying that in the XML, you have to use these special with this special symbols. Then element names must obey XML naming conventions. What are the naming conventions? We are going to study in the next slide, but they have to adhere to these naming conventions. Okay, so element names must obey XML naming conventions. Then XML is case sensitive. Okay, so you can refer like you can treat this like a C language where even a some case is going to be deferred with already declared variable. It is going to give a compiler error. So in that way, we can understand that XML is also a case sensitive language, and this was thoughtfully taken because HTML was not a case sensitive language. Okay, so HTML in uh, the previous classes I have given with an example. Even though you are writing the paragraph P in small or entirely in caps, both are valid. Similarly, I have given the example of HTML. Then this is also fine. Second one is also fine. Third one is also fine. Okay, so unless otherwise you are not changing the characters with that upper or lower formatting, they can be applied in any way. Okay, so this is also valid, this is also valid, and this is also valid. And XML is not like that. XML, if you are defining in this way, this is completely different. Second one is also a different element you are creating. Third one is also a different element. In that way, one element name can be semantically we can have the same meaning, but syntactically they are completely seen as a different implementations. Okay, so that's why the case sensitivity is of the higher importance in XML. Then XML will keep white space in your PC data. Only in the PC data they will reserve the white spaces. And what about the element name? We have already again discussed in the starting tag and ending tag there should not be any space even at the starting tag, even after immediate starting of the name or of the end of the name. You cannot apply anywhere in this particular element name. So that's why in the PC data means this is my end of the starting tag. Suppose there is an element called as XYZ. So this is XYZ end of this. And here if you are applying some spaces intermittently, they can be taken into consideration by the parser. अगर एलिमेंट के पीसी डेटा के अंदर स्पेसेस है तो वो कंसीडर करेगा, बट एलिमेंट के अंदर अगर है दैट मींस एलिमेंट के स्टार्ट टैग एंड एंड टैग के अंदर है तो वो कंसीडर नहीं करेगा by the XML parser. So these are the rules for adhering to design an XML in the first place. And one thing to remember, out of these 11 rules that were given, even if it is disobeying with any of the rules that were given here, then it is not called as an XML. यहाँ पे जो दिया गया इसमें से कोई भी एक अगर वैलिड मतलब फॉलो नहीं कर रहा होगा तो it will not be an XML to say. Okay, you are created some junk data, but it's not an XML. So that's why I keep in mind all these. The rules are very simple. If you design a one simple document, you will automatically come to know what is right and what is wrong. So the basic rules will be adhered to any XML document that you are going to create for your practical purposes, and we are going to see with the software, and it will automatically complain it's not a well-formed document. Okay, so that means all the 11 rules, if it is following, then only we can say that as an XML document. And any XML document given with the document content should be well formed. आप जो भी XML डिजाइन कर रहे होंगे तो it has to be by default well formed. Okay, it has to be well formed, and well formed rules are like this. The first one is declaration should be there, starting tag and ending tag should be there, and corresponding closing tag should be there. Otherwise it has to be a self containing tag. Then exactly one root element should be present. They should not overlap. Attribute values must be quoted. Some special characters and entity references you can keep if you want. Then naming conventions have to be applied, and it's a case sensitive language. Then the XML parser will keep the white spaces in the PC data. So it's not a rule, but it's a rule from the side of the parser. Okay, so while you create, you can write the content without any spaces also. That is also valid. But you keep the white spaces also, it is also valid. So that's what the rule says. Okay, so these are the rules that we have studied. It is these rules that make XML such a universal format for interchanging the data. So why all these rules and formalities have been applied on XML is because we want to have a document strict in its implementation. If it is loosely given with the rules, then somebody might give some optional implementations, like we have seen with the missing of the paragraph element in the HTML. So this becomes an optional. But if we apply the same thing to the XML also, then there is no point of taking another language when already one kind of language in the format of HTML is already there. Okay, already ऐसा कुछ language है which is not that much stricter. So then there is no point of taking another language which is also obeying the same thing. Okay, so that's why the strictness has been taken into consideration in the very first place, and the data has to be in the well-formed nature, and then only the documents can be interchanged for the different applications. So as long as your XML documents follow all of the rules in the XML specification, any available XML parser will be able to read the information they contain. अगर आप भी एक XML को डिजाइन करते हैं with these rules adhering to the whatever the rules that were given by the W3C, okay, ये सारे standardize किए W3C ने, then you can then you are going to create an XML which is already parsable by the n number of parsers available on the internet. There are thousands of XML parsers out there. Even every browser contains one XML parser integrated in that. So that's why your data should be readable. That means you have to first of all comply to the rules specified by the XML, whatever the XML rules that it has to adhere. Your document should be adhering to the well-formedness rules. So that's why the strictness is of utmost important in the XML design. Then XML declaration is looking like this. This is what we call this kind of starting directive. So this directive is called as PI. This I have explained. What is this PI? It is a post-processing instruction. Okay, so that means it is for the parser to understand what exactly it is containing, whether any DTD is available externally or not, what is the encoding format. So all these things the compiler has to know before parsing the document root element. इसीलिए रूट एलिमेंट के ऊपर इसको लिखते हैं PI को. So the PI has to give all the instructions to the parser accordingly, and the XML declaration is not required by the browsers but is required by the most XML processors. So every browser is actually containing XML processors, and the first XML processor was integrated by the Microsoft Internet Explorer. So Internet Explorer ने first उसको integrate करके ready किया था. So that means आज की डेट में तो हर एक ब्राउजर वो support करता है XML parsers को. So that's why if you are double clicking or opening up this XML in the browser, you can neatly see all the document contents in the XML format itself, and some portions of the keywords, attributes, their values are getting highlighted from browser to browser. ये आप open करके भी देख सकते हैं. जब आप practicals करेंगे तो आपको समझ में आ जाएगा. So every browser is actually integrated with this XML parser. So at present the XML declaration must be first. अगर आप ये दे रहे हो, ये जो PI processing instruction or some directives, this is called as processing instruction or directives also we can say. So these directives, if at all there, they have to be in the first line. And see here, they must be first. Not even a white space is also allowed. ओके अगर आपका डॉक्यूमेंट यहाँ से स्टार्ट हो रहा है, ओके एंड आप सोचे होंगे कि एक लाइन छोड़ के करता हूँ, दैट बिकम्स इनवैलिड. एक स्पेस देके देता हूँ मैं, दैट इज आल्सो इनवैलिड. सेकंड लाइन में देता हूँ, दैट इज आल्सो इनवैलिड. सो ऑल दीज रूल्स आर एप्लीकेबल. सो इफ एट ऑल द PI इज प्रेजेंट, देन इट शुड बी द फर्स्ट character that is coming in the document. Even a white space is also not allowed. Remember this point, and you can check it out when doing the practicals. आप कर सकते हैं. Then note that the brackets are given with this fashion: less than question mark and ends with question mark less than. So it's not a normal element. Elements के लिए हम क्या करते हैं? Elements के लिए we directly take the name of the element after the greater than or less than symbol. Okay, so बीच में कुछ भी space भी नहीं आता, कुछ भी नहीं आता. Okay, but when we are talking about the PIs or some directives, so this is something different. That means यहाँ पे जब ये question mark आता है starting में ending में, then it becomes a directive. Okay, so the next encoding version is equal to 10 is required. So this is required actually. This is the mandatory thing, but this is optional one. So this becomes optional. So that means आप ऐसा लिख सकते हैं XML version 1 is equal to 0, encoding UTF-8, then leave this, or you can also take this standalone is equal to, so that becomes an optional one. So version 10 is required. Encoding can be, this can be UTF-8 or UTF-16. That means this can be Unicode or ASCII characters. So that becomes optional on your documents content. अगर आपको completely English में ही लिखना है या normal text के अलावा ज़्यादा कुछ symbols use नहीं कर रहे होंगे तो you can safely take on this UTF-8. अगर आपको some German language, Marathi language ये सब include करना है तो क्या करेंगे? You have to take this Unicode. So then standalone tells whether there is a separate DTD or not. So then rules for the elements. There are some rules for elements which are fundamental to the understanding of the XML. Every starting tag must have a matching end tag, or it can be a self-closing tag. So this we have seen in the name well-formedness. Okay, जब भी अगर आप starting tag open करेंगे, so corresponding ending tag should be visible to the parser. And अगर ऐसा कुछ data नहीं है तो क्या करेंगे? You can take a self-closing tag. So that is rule number 1. Second one, tags cannot overlap. जैसे मैंने बताया कि यहाँ पे ये है तो immediate closing वाला B नहीं आ सकता. It has to be A only. Then inside this A you can open up one more element which can be taken as B. ये valid है. Okay, but ये crisscross नहीं चलेगा. Crisscrossing is not at all applicable. So XML documents can have only one root element. एक ही root element दिया जाएगा. That is the parent. उसके अंदर आप ऐसा embed करेंगे. Okay, so this becomes your root element. Inside of this root element, all the elements are getting nested. So similarly, all these elements are getting opened up also because they cannot be nested. अगर ये है तो ये A ही है, ये B है तो B यहाँ पे क्लोज हो रहा है, C है तो C यहाँ पे क्लोज हो रहा है, D है तो D यहाँ पे क्लोज हो रहा है. ऐसा इसको स्ट्रक्चर्ड वे में इम्प्लीमेंट करना है. Element names must obey XML naming conventions. It will be dealt with in next slide. Okay. Then element names, XML is case sensitive. This we already know, and this will preserve the PC data, white space in the PC data. So these are the normal rules. This we already know when we talked about the well formedness. तो आधे से ज़्यादा तो वो well formedness का ही rules है. Starting tag है तो ending tag होना चाहिए. Properly nest होना चाहिए. एक ही root element होना चाहिए. So that's all. And case sensitive तो है ही XML. So there is nothing to actually remember for the element declaration rules. And what are the naming conventions? Names must begin with a letter normally, and if it is not possible, at least with an underscore. And you can take the combination of some different characters, like letters ले सकते हैं, then digits ले सकते हैं, Roman or foreign characters को ले सकते हैं. Foreign characters को लिया तो आपको क्या करना पड़ेगा? UTF-16 लेना पड़ेगा. Okay. So in that way you have to take care. But moreover, every element should be started with an alphabet normally. In case if it is not possible for your document to represent that content, then you can take an underscore so that you are starting with a number. यहाँ पे आप number start कर सकते हैं. But directly starting with a number is not at all a valid element that you are going to create. So the first and foremost important rule says that it has to start generally with a letter. If it is not the case, then start with an underscore. That's all. Thereafter, you can take digits, letters, Roman characters, foreign language characters, anything that you want to take to represent your data properly. We can have the implementations of the dot, hyphen, underscore, semicolon. All these are applicable, but they do have some reservations. We will come to know gradually. Dot भी आप ले सकते हैं, hyphen भी ले सकते हैं, underscore भी ले सकते हैं. Underscore generally ले सकते हैं, but columns क्या है कि generally namespaces के लिए हम use करते हैं. नहीं है. The namespaces are very important in the XML, and they do open up a separate technology called as XSLT. So काफी बड़ा है. But before creating a namespace, you have to use this symbol. Then combining characters and extenders. So all these are possibilities there for creating a very valid XML element in your document. So moving on to the next slide. This is a very well structured, well formed XML that is given in this screenshot. And then comes with this chapter, and chapter contains paragraph because the novel directly cannot see this paragraph here. So that's what you have to understand again. When you declare the DTD, you have to remember these conditions. Novel directly cannot see this paragraph because the paragraph is a child of a foreword. So similarly, here also the paragraph is a child of this chapter. Okay, so novel cannot directly see the paragraph, any of the paragraph, either from the foreword or from the chapter. Okay, so this also we cannot see, and this also we cannot see directly from the novel. That's what the limitation. But it is a well structured XML that we are seeing here, because for every corresponding starting tag, corresponding ending tag is also there, and they are properly nested. ऐसा नहीं है कि jumbled up है. Okay, and you can see attributes are there, and they are given in double quotes. Even though if it is a digit, they are given in double quotes, or you can optionally take the single quotes also. So these are the rules that we have to remember in our mind before designing a well-formed XML. Other than these rules, nothing is there to take in a different way. So novel है, इसको properly आपको embed करना है. This is the first element. This is the second element under the novel. Then first element again contains this inner element. Second element contains the paragraph element multiple times. So in that way, you can see the data. and optionally some attributes are also there. So all these becomes very much clear, and this is a very good example of the well-formedness of the XML. And again, I am reiterating that unless a document is not well formed, you cannot say that document as an XML. अगर well formed नहीं है तो XML ही नहीं बनाया आपने, दूसरा कुछ तो भी बनाया है. Okay, that can be a junk. Then XML as a tree. Okay, in the previous example, what is the innermost element? The innermost element is paragraph. And what is the root element? The root element is novel. And if you see that by reversing it, you can see the novel element is the root element. It is having two sub elements. One is forward and second one is chapter, and it may optionally contain some attributes, and chapter is again containing multiple inner elements, and this element is again containing with some data. So this is the PC data. Okay, so ultimately the leaves are actually PC data. The leaves means इसके अंदर का जो content है ना, these are the leaves. Okay, so the last part and whatever the data, textual data content that you are seeing here, this is the PC data ultimately, and the root element is represented in this way. Okay, so an XML parser actually parses the document content in this fashion. Valid XML. Up till now we were discussing about the well-formedness of the XML. So one more time explaining, अगर document well formed नहीं है तो वो XML ही नहीं है. Okay, so जब हम XML बोलेंगे तो it has to be a well formed. So sorry, it has to be a well formed. So जब आप XML बनाएंगे तो it has to comply all the rules of the well formedness. So then what is about the valid XML? So validation is something you want to apply to your document. Suppose some business rules we want to apply on our data. Unique key, primary key, not null. Okay, so null, all these are rules, all these are the constraints. So why we apply these constraints? So if you are not applying these constraints, some data may involuntarily get like not inserted into the database. So अगर आप कोई employee का database का details आप अगर maintain कर रहे होंगे, you want to know the name, you want to preserve the mobile number, you want to keep the email address, and if you are suppose you have a form which the employee has to fill in, and thereby the database is going to serve with that particular data, and accordingly the database is getting filled up with the given data by the user. अगर आपने क्या किया, validation आपने फॉर्म के ऊपर भी अप्लाई नहीं किया, डेटाबेस के ऊपर भी अप्लाई नहीं किया, देन व्हाट इट बिकम्स, अगर मान लो मैं एज एन यूजर आई हैव नॉट एट ऑल गिवन माय फोन नंबर और आई माइट नॉट हैव गिवन माय फर्स्ट नेम आल्सो, मैं मेरा नाम भी नहीं दिया मैंने, एंड आई हैव क्लिक्ड ऑन सेव and your database is also not complying with any constraints, so what it becomes, you are entirely saving the nulls in the database. So after some time when anybody is checking with the data of all the customers or employees of the organization, so some missing portions will be visible. Okay, so there is nothing but a phone number is there, there is a first name but not given with the last name, email ID which is very important for the organization is completely missed out by the user. So all these things can happen, so that's why we have to validate the data before sending it to the database. So same thing is applicable for the valid XML. Validation keeps track of the whatever the important constraints of that particular document. Okay, if you are maintaining a data about particular organization or some financial balance sheets you want to prepare, before creating the data you want to ensure that some portion of the data has to be mandatorily filled up by the customers or the consumers. So at those conditions you have to apply some rules, and the rules can only be validated by the parsers, XML parsers, and for validating some constraints we can check by using this particular syntax called as DTD. Okay, So this DTD is document type definition. So this is a old definition because it is coming again from the HTML. So it's not anything new uh, for the from the XML point of view. Even in the HTML also you might be seeing this DTD, document type definition, because both the parents are both the derivatives are coming from the same parent HTML. So a DTD defines what tags are legal and where they can occur in the XML. So this is a very interesting validation that we can see in the practical scenario. So an XML document does not require a DTD. Okay, remember this. XML, that means a well-formed XML, do not normally require a DTD. That means it's not optional thing. ये mandatory नहीं है. But when you want to apply some constraints, अगर आपका database किसी के साथ share करना है या migrate करना है into a different format, suppose आप Oracle से MySQL में data को migrate कर रहे हैं. So meanwhile, XML can be the mediator. So once the MySQL data can be migrated in the format of an XML and XML to Oracle. In that way also we can do. But before doing the things, we have to keep enable our DTD rules open so that any part of the data is missing, so that can be safely taken care of. XML is well structured if it follows the rules given earlier. Okay, जो हमने पहले के 2-3 slides के पहले जो भी rules हमने check किया है, अगर आप properly follow कर रहे होंगे तो that is a well-formed XML basically you are creating. In addition, XML is valid if it declares a DTD. See here, if it declares a DTD and conforms to the DTD. Okay, अगर आपके पास XML का DTD आपने बनाया है, वो XML के साथ append कर रहे हैं, then only the validation comes into the picture. This is an important point to understand. Okay, so otherwise this point clearly says that XML do not require any DTD for normal document designing. Okay, document XML में बनाना है तो आपको DTD की जरूरत नहीं है, but अगर आपको validate करना है तो DTD का ही सहारा लेना पड़ेगा. So a DTD can be included in the XML, but is typically a separate document. Have you seen this declaration? Where is that? Yes, this one. Standalone is equal to yes. So what it is referring is whether any external DTD is available or not. So that we are conveying to the compiler or to the parser. Okay. So standalone is equal to there is a DTD which is lying outside of the XML document. If standalone is equal to no, that means there can be a DTD, but that is an internal DTD. So in that way, the context is getting changed. Then errors in the XML documents will stop XML programs. अगर आपसे छोटा सा भी गलती होता है, छोटा सा भी गलती मतलब केस सेंसिटिविटी अगर आपने बराबर मेंटेन नहीं किया, and you have not stick to the rules adhered by the well-formedness, nesting of the elements properly maintain नहीं कर रहे हैं, overlapping जा रहा है, attributes values को quote नहीं किया आपने, so any error will actually stop the XML program. Okay, from the parsing. Some alternatives to DTD are XML schemas and relax engine. Okay, so different technologies are there. This is a very basic crude version of getting validated your documents, but these are very sophisticated techniques that we can use use होते हैं. But smaller documents के लिए आप DTD भी आप use कर सकते हैं. And what is the purpose of the DTDs as well as XML schemas? To provide the validation. Okay, so the technology or technique can be different. Relax ng use कर सकते हैं आप, XML schemas use कर सकते हैं, DTDs use कर सकते हैं. But providing those techniques, what you are doing is you are ultimately validating your XML document. How to validate a document? We will see in the next classes. And okay, I will explain this slide, then we can stop for today. An element may contain other elements, plain text or both. Element ऐसा भी हो सकता है, element ऐसा भी हो सकता है, and element को आप ऐसा भी डिजाइन कर सकते हैं. So what is the difference? You can see and understand. पहला वाला simple element है, second वाला complex element है. Complex in the sense actually it is containing the sub elements, multiple elements in that way. But you can see they are clearly nested, not overlapped. यहाँ तक एक element है, or second one is this one. So, and these two are properly embedded in the name element. So this is a well-formed and valid element actually, valid XML. Then element containing both. देखो यहाँ पे डायरेक्टली पीसी डेटा आया है, यहाँ पे पीसी डेटा के अंदर भी एलिमेंट्स हैं, ऐसा भी पॉसिबिलिटी है. एंड थर्ड वर्जन में टेक्स्ट भी है, एलिमेंट भी है. दिस इज ऑल्सो वैलिड. सो आप XML को जब भी डिजाइन कर सकते हैं तो दिस कैन बी ए सिंपल एलिमेंट. ओके, द एग्जांपल इज फर्स्ट वन. दिस कैन बी ए कॉम्प्लेक्स एलिमेंट. ओके, एंड दिस कैन बी ए मिक्स्ड एलिमेंट. So these are some different terms that were given, but ultimately आप अगर normal perspective से देखा जाएगा तो element के अंदर जो भी आता है तो वो consider किया जाएगा as a PC data. PC data again parse करके again identify करेगा whether any inner element is there or not. So in that way the parser will go inside into the document leaves. An element that contain both the text and other elements is said to have mixed content. Okay, so this is what that particular example is saying. So the third example है mixed element. So mixed content is legal, but from the parser point of view, we generally treat that as a bad way of representing our data. It's legal, it's valid actually, but it's bad. It's not proper to use. Why it is not proper to use? Because it can create some confusion in the minds of the programmer. So that's what the limitation. Otherwise it's not at all a very bad thing, but we may avoid that kind of implementations. That means we got generally choices of two. One is simple and second one is complex. So either you have to obey with the simple and complex. Even though if you are taking with the mixed one, that is also fine, but try to stick to the simple and complex implementations so that your parser will also not bogged down by the complexities of your XML document. Then mixed content makes it much harder to define the valid XML. जब आप validation के लिए rules apply करेंगे ना, third one के लिए design करना काफी complicated होता है. So that's why it is not that much recommended. Mixed content is more complicated to use in the program. Mixed content adds no power to the XML. It is never needed for anything. Okay, ये mixed content लेके हम additionally कुछ ज़्यादा हम इसको दे नहीं रहे XML को. That's a way we can use sometimes to denote our data, but usually we tend to omit if it is not required to do so. Okay, so that means we got only two opportunities. One is simple implementations and second one is complex implementations. Exclusively we will deal with all these possibilities later on in our future classes.